Right. We have folks coming in now, so we'll give it just a moment till everyone can join on Zoom. But I would like to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining this afternoon. My name is Katee Van Horn, and I think we are good to go. I think we have most of the folks that were in the waiting room have now joined. So welcome to this conversation. I am very privileged to share the stage with some amazing partners and some amazing folks that definitely understand the importance of inclusion and belonging. So would love to welcome you to this session of inclusion and belonging in the workplace and beyond. As I said, my name is Katee Van Horn. I'm the Chief People Officer for WebPros and currently freezing in Houston, Texas. I do wish I was back home in Arizona, but would love to introduce the folks that are going to be on the panel here today. And we'll start off with you, Carmen, if you don't mind. Would love for you to introduce yourself and share why today, especially in the current environment that we're in, why is inclusion and belonging important to you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Katee. Carmen Jandacek. I have worked at Arizona Public Service in the Human Resources Department, going on my 30th year here. I have worked with one community and certainly many other people in the community that really reflects the importance of inclusion historically. But as we sit here today, especially from an employer perspective, never have I ever seen the level of choice and agency that employees have that I've witnessed in the last few years. They want to align themselves with companies that recognize and that see them holistically, and it's now more important than ever to really demonstrate that as an employer. And when I think about the crucible of incredible change velocity that we are experiencing in everybody's workplace today, and the resilient straining events, external events most importantly, that are happening, many times it feels like to us, right? From an employer perspective, it just refocuses us on our mission to ensure that every single employee feels included, feels seen, and when they're at work, they're experiencing a workplace that views and sees all of them and everything that they're bringing into the workplace. So it's never been more important than what we are walking into today in 2025.
Alexander, would love to turn it over to you and your special guest that you have in the room with you.
For everyone watching, my special guest, her name is Lydia. She's usually right here with me every day. I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at GCC, Glendale Community College, for those that are not familiar with it. And I am residential faculty there. I've been there for 8.5 years. I've been in higher education for the past 16 years. I think for me, the biggest reason that diversity, equity, inclusion, access, belonging, whatever acronyms you want to put out there are important is because diversity is not going anywhere. It's always been present. It's just been present in multiple different forms. Now we're able to see visibly what some of those forms are. We're recognizing more that there are a lot of different types of diversity that exist. But I think part of our missions is for everybody to be able to thrive at our institutions. And in higher education, it's not just about surviving, but how do you do well, not in spite of that institution, but because of the institution. And if we're going to have that because of or due to the way that the educational system or the institution is set up, then the institution has to know who's coming through the doors and not expect everybody that comes through those doors to be prepared for the success that they're trying to get them to, but understand what is it that they're navigating in order to help them navigate that to get to that level of success. Whether it's a student or an employee, we have to understand and be flexible and ready to pivot a little bit in order to help those people stay with us and achieve the goals that they want, unless we want high turnover or something like that, or we want high levels of issues of discrimination and harassment happening at the institution. And a lot of those things don't always happen intentionally. it's because someone doesn't understand something about someone else or how that person might relate to something. If we had more understanding about the people that are with us, then it would help us navigate and make choices in a different way.
So thanks, Alexander. And Michele, would love to turn over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michele Boggs. I'm the Staff Vice President for Talent Acquisition and Organizational Development at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona. I'm also the Chief Diversity Officer. And the reason inclusion or diversity, equity, and inclusion, sort of to Alexander's point, whatever you want to call it, is so important is because, quite frankly, long gone are the days of the IBM blue suit that everybody had to wear. And it kind of set the culture and the standard for what was acceptable. In today's work environments, employees come in and help to establish the culture and the standards of organizations. And if your organization welcomes that diverse viewpoint, welcomes their background and their experience, you are more likely to attract and retain top talent in your organization. And, you know, from a business standpoint, that's the imperative. You want the best talent out there. You want them to contribute to your organization's success. So that's from a business standpoint, that's why it's important.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I have some questions that I would love to ask you all, but for the participants, we have a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen that you all can click on if you have questions for our panelists. Would love for this to be an interactive conversation. So I'm going to jump into the questions I have, and then we'll see what else we come up with as we continue the conversation. So would love to start off with, you know, just a little bit about what your business does and what your organization does internally to promote a culture of inclusion. And let's start off with you, Alexander.
Okay, just for everyone to understand and know the structure of our institution, I work for Maricopa Community Colleges, so we have 10 colleges, and each of our colleges is independently accredited. So we do have different structures depending on the college, but as a district, we do have a Center for Excellence and Inclusive Democracy, which we come together with our Diversity Advisory Council, which has representatives from each of the colleges that are present, and we are in district-wide discussions. But GCC specifically, the things that we do, we have both a diversity committee as well as a DEI council. Our diversity committee, just to help people understand and get the context, is focused on celebrations of diversity throughout the year. So they focus on a lot of the programs that we have. They work with our Office of Student Life and our employees to create diversity celebrations. And then our DEI council, that's more strategically structured to where we have leaders from all across the college sort of getting that DEI education across to the leaders so that it's not just, oh, Alexander, that's our DEI person and that's the person we're expected to do all of this work. No, the work happens throughout the institution. I can talk about all the things that we do because there are so many people doing the work across the institution. So our leaders continue to educate themselves in DEI, but I'm also in that space with the leaders to be able to have some of those discussions with them to ensure that equity focusedness or equity mindedness is at the top of everything that they do. So they approach things not with the deficit mindset that, oh, this person can't succeed because X, Y, and Z. No, we think about, well, what is it that we need to change? How do we mold things in order to ensure that that success happens? Outside of that, we also have a program that focuses specifically on our staff members, moving away from our faculty members, specifically on staff and administration, focusing on how the mentorship happens based on the person, not necessarily the job that they're doing, but building trust and building relationships with the people that they are leading, our leaders, as they have those conversations, but also making the space for the employee to have a conversation with the leader that they and understand that that conversation is not necessarily leading to some sort of disciplinary action, but that they want it to be a two-way conversation. But we also have courses that are focused on our faculty members and how do we create equity in our courses and focusing on the universal design for learning, and how the education is not just top down, where the educator is coming in telling the student how things are done, but also making space for students to give feedback on the assignments, feedback on the course and how it's running, so that we can assess what we're doing and change a lot of those techniques in our classes to make sure that they are meeting the needs of the students, but also reaching them and getting the knowledge out that we need to get to them in whatever format or fashion that we have. So I guess I said a lot, but probably not too much. But to sort of minimize that, to make it simple, our DEI efforts are a two-way street. It's not just coming top down, it's also going bottom up, regardless of whatever we're looking at.
I love that. And I think, the piece that I'm going to call out of what you said is just the fact that this isn't one person's job. It's everybody's job in the organization. And I see, all of your heads shaking yes, because I think that's that's something that is really critical that folks sometimes forget, that, oh, it's not just the DEI person or the HR person. Everyone is responsible for the culture, Michele, as you mentioned earlier, and for this conversation. So Michele, would like to ask if there's anything you would like to add about what your organization's doing.
Our organization does something similar to what Alexander explained. We have executive level support. We have a leadership council that's actually run by our employees. And annually, every year, we have 15 to 18 members of the council who arrange the activities, the education, and help to liaise with our affinity groups. We currently, as an organization, have 9 standing affinity groups. And what's interesting about them is that while some of them are culturally based, many of them are simply based on how employees view key roles in their life, and they want support and allies in that area of their life. So as an example, we have a caregivers affinity group. And this audience of people want support from other employees in this area of their life. And our affinity groups create that environment where people feel safe and can have those conversations and find support. So it's not only supported and advocated on the part of our leadership, but we also have the Leadership Council that pushes out a lot of the education and development. And our affinity groups are the way in which all of our employees, all 3,200, can participate in our DE&I efforts and have a say in our DE&I efforts.
Thanks, Michele. And I will add that Blue Cross Blue Shield has been a phenomenal partner with One Community and has rolled out a lot of the One Community Institute classes to their team members, which has been, I think, well received. And Michele, I want to just call out one piece that you said there on the affinity groups. I think folks are searching for and want that connection at work and want to have those feelings of belonging. So having those affinity groups that aren't just, what their traditional, this is what diversity is, but thinking about all of the different facets of a person and how you can bring them to the table. So I love that you all do that. So thank you. Carmen?
Yeah, so echoing a lot of what we've heard from the other two speakers, but key, most important, executive support, right? Executive support followed by clear communication, right? We have a very strong why organizationally of why inclusion is important to us, why belonging is important to us. And if that is a miss in anybody's organization, if that communication isn't there, people fill in the blanks, and they fill in the blanks, unfortunately, with the wrong thing. So that clear, repeatable narrative of why this is important to us is really something that really bakes into the culture then. Education is incredibly important, right? Starting with the senior executives of the organization, moving down through our other leadership. Again, exploring the depth and breadth of what DE&I and B is, making sure that people understand that DEI and B is for everybody, right? So everybody has a seat at the table. Everybody has a valid view that we want to hear and understand, and we want to have healthy tension and narrative around, right? We have 11 employee network groups, and they also are many times our arms and legs into the community. So taking the important work that we do internally and then helping, whether it's nonprofits or different areas in the company, different areas in the communities that we serve throughout the state of Arizona. And then kind of lastly, interrogating the how that we do things. We're 130 plus years old as a company, right? So you can only imagine how hard it is sometimes to change the how that we do things. And it's the way we've always done things, right? But really taking an eye towards things of saying, okay, is there anything systemic in any of the hows that we're doing that we can be better, right? Anything that was maybe developed years ago that we need to make sure is modernized today and reflective of the workforce today. So that takes a lot of kind of inward looking, a lot of interrogation and vulnerability from that perspective to end up with a better product on the outcome.
Awesome. Thanks, Carmen. And, I think just to call out one of the pieces that you mentioned is, starting with the top down. I think sometimes when we're working with folks in the C-suite, it can be a little bit difficult to help them along on their journey and bring them along on their journey. And so starting there and really, I joke around that I don't ever do C-suite trainings. I do briefings because they already know all the things that they need to know. I'm just reminding them, of course, bringing them along. So perfect. I love that. And, I'd also say just sitting here in front of the three of you, you are three powerhouse employers in Arizona and beyond, I should say. But, especially in Arizona. And so, I would love to know, we have a question from Martin. So what do you think the future of diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and accessibility will be moving forward, as it seems many are successfully shutting down or impacting the work, and many in leadership are bending to the whims of those bastardizing the work under the auspice of wokeness, or that diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and accessibility work is discriminatory. So I know that was a mouthful. Would love to hear, Michele, if we can start with you, what your thoughts are on that. I know we just got some news yesterday about McDonald's, and we've heard from a lot of different companies here recently, but what are your thoughts on this, Michele?
Honestly, I think it's a little bit of a shame. But I think that it's going to be, it's work that has to be done from a business standpoint. It has to support the business and the hiring, bringing in the right talent, ensuring that they stay with your organization, ensuring that they have an environment in which they can deliver their very best to your company is critical, no matter which organization you are. So no matter what they call it, whether they call it DE&I or they call it inclusion, they call it belonging, it will still be a part of how and what organizations do and should do to ensure that they create the environment where employees want to work and stay, to be a strong employer or a recognized employer.
Thanks, Michele. Carmen?
Yeah, I think it is a challenging space that we're in right now. However, if I zoom out, because so often we get very myopic in what's happening like in the moment, and you think about things, I always say in the organization, an organization has to breathe, right? And sometimes that's an inhale and sometimes that's an exhale. And the pace of change has to be consumable. And so there are times where I think we look at things and we think, gosh, this is coming to a stop. But I firmly believe that the world doesn't go backwards, right? This may be a pause. I also look at it sometimes like, how you lose weight. Nobody loses weight in a straight line, right? Sometimes it goes up a little bit, sometimes it goes down a little bit, right? Like it takes time. There's steps forward and there's steps backwards, but ultimately it's arcing in the right direction. And I think we're at one of those spaces right now. And for many years, we haven't felt the significance of the pause that we are maybe feeling today. But I think at the end of the day, the world will move forward. It may not be at the pace that we wish it to be, but it'll be at the consumable pace that everybody will be able to kind of consume. And I think it's important that we become incredibly good at storytelling, because to effectuate that change, you've got to have a powerful story that changes individual hearts and minds. And it has to be something that can be relatable, and something that is really going to have somebody walk away and feel moved by that. And I think that is something we can all continue to keep working on as we work through this period of time.
Thanks, Carmen. Alexander?
So thinking about this from a constitutional standpoint, because I think a lot of people don't always think constitutionally whether or not DEI is something that is constitutional or goes against the Constitution. As an institution itself, it's not necessarily supported by the Constitution, meaning we're not required to have offices. We're not required to have staff. Those are not things that are inalienable rights that we can't get rid of. But as an individual behavior, it is part of the Constitution. We have the right to this equality that we're supposed to be promised. But in order to get that, you have to have education around that. We also have to think about, as my colleague was saying, the storytelling. Who gets to tell the story is the person who's most powerful. When we think about policies being written, all policies are just power that has been institutionalized. What does that look like when we're writing that policy? You know, who was in the room to establish the power necessary to set that power structure up? We also have to know that as semantics plays a part in it. So there are many institutions across the country that are, as we're talking about, changing the name. Some of them in states where there's not even anything anti-DEI that's going on, they're just preparing for those changes to happen in the future. I think the most important person or group of people is whoever you call your clients, regardless of your employees. You want people to come back to support your business. And if they feel like you don't know anything about them, you don't have any product that relates to them, you can't speak their language, whatever it may be, the bottom line, you won't have them and you won't have your business for long. So if you decide to take it out, you're going to have to think about those people that are going to, whether or not they're going to return, and how the culture of your institution, your business is going to change over time, and what are the long-term effects. I also believe that a lot of the fear that we face right now is because for a long time, people have just pushed people of color or somebody else in the DEI role. That person didn't have the knowledge that you want them to bring to the table, and they should not have the responsibility of trying to educate you on everything diversity related. So then you want them to try to defend why DEI is important, but they haven't had that education. Maybe they're lucky enough and you invested in their professional development and now they can do that. But for a lot of companies, they haven't done those things. So if you are hiring or thinking about DEI in your institution, make sure that you have someone that's able to help your company defend why it is important and why it's valuable, and also know the legalities behind it. So I don't think a lot of people always think about those things when they just push somebody over here. Oh, you have your diversity person. That's an important role that is critical to maintaining DEI in your institution.
Amen. That's what I can give you on that one. So I'm going to jump to another one of the questions we have that goes to the storytelling and goes to this whole piece of the microphone and how each one of you and your organizations really can impact public policy. So, you know, who's writing those policies? When businesses weigh in on public policies that impact their employees, they can have that immense impact on these debates and on these conversations. What do you think makes your voices so powerful? And let's start with you, Carmen. Oh, you're muted.
All right. You know, as one of Arizona's largest and longest serving companies, we take our commitment to corporate citizenship incredibly seriously, right? And we really, we look at issues that when they're impacting our customers, when they're impacting our employees, and most importantly, our state, right? You know, providing a service that is a key infrastructure. We're very concerned when things are, you know, impacting our employees that are going to be able to provide that service, and to our customers from that perspective. You know, honestly, a conservative organization that is judicious about the resources and how we influence that from that perspective. But, there are times when there are social issues that we've got to weigh in on, and we do that when we feel that our voice is going to help advance a topic important to the state, important to our customers, and certainly important to our energy future.
Thanks, Carmen. Michele?
I think we take pretty much the same posture as an organization. We will weigh in on topics and discussions, and we share it from the standpoint of our membership, our customers who have our products and services, to ensure that their voice is heard and that their interests are included as part of the discussion, whatever, or the policy making that is included. And surely, once policies are passed and aligned, of course, we really, one of the things I really should point out too, because this is a lot of discussion in this space of late, is from a healthcare standpoint, our organization particularly focuses on affordability for our members, because we know that that is very much top of mind for our customers and our members is, can I afford healthcare? So that is a lot of our policy position, is to ensure that the policies and practices that are discussed or passed keep that in mind.
All right, thanks, Michele. Alexander?
From a policy standpoint, I think in terms of higher education, I can't stress enough the value and the importance of higher education. Our leaders come from institutions of higher education. So the people that walk through our doors and leave our institutions, they're going out in the world and they're going to be the ones that are creating policy. So having these DEI discussions and education while they're in our classrooms, while they're with us, whether it's in class or extracurricular, co-curricular activities, those are the lessons that they're going to take with them as they create policy. It's not just what they learned, I don't know, in electrical engineering, that they're going to take to APS or any other institution. They're going to take their experience outside of just those electrical engineering classes with them. One of the things that I educate my students on, because I teach social sciences, is about human interaction. So no matter what, any position that you're in, the person that's next to you, they are a human before they are the electrical engineer. They are a human before they are the doctor. They are a human before they're your accountant. So understanding how to interact and be open and approach those situations with humility is also, and empathy as well, understanding what other people might experience in their journeys to wherever it is that they're going, and that might be different from yours. As you're creating these policies, what do you know about the experiences of those that are different from you? Because they're going to be impacted by the policies that you make. So I think higher education for me, because I'm biased, because I'm an educator, that it's one of the most important things when it comes to our business having an impact. It's not just what us educators say, it's the people who leave our doors. What did they get from us? Because they're going to take that to their policy making journey as well, if they're in those spaces to make those policies.
Awesome. And this is going to cause me to go off script. I told you I might do that. So here we go. So Alexander, you mentioned kind of knowing what is needed and what they're going to take away into the world. So I would love to know from all three of you, what are you doing when it comes to creating an inclusive environment? So truly, beyond the programs, beyond all of these things, how are you working with those individuals, not the, engineer or whatever it might be? How are you working with those individuals to truly create an inclusive environment? Alexander, you're unmuted. You go. Yeah.
I just figured I'd unmute since I caused you to go off script. I think, well, outside of the classroom, one of the things that I do is get involved in student activities, get involved in other activities on the campus, or also attending things that I don't even have any affiliation with. One of the things I'll share with you, for a few years, I was in a department of women's studies, and I was the only full-time faculty member. and I walk into the classroom, let's talk about the elephant in the room. And that's usually me because I'm educating you on things that impact the majority of my students were women. So it's like, let's talk about this. I'm talking about your life. How do we contextualize my experience and your experience and how I might talk about these things? But I brought that up because I'm not the end all. And I take that not just in the classroom, but with any social situation where there is something that comes to the conversation or something that happens in the space where it creates a questionable moment for me. The beauty of common sense is that what's common to me is not common to everyone. I don't need to approach that with you lack common sense because you did something that was different from what I would do. I approach it with curiosity. I come to the space of, well, let me experience this thing. Let me ask questions genuinely that I may or even share that I don't come from a space where this is common. Can you help me understand it? So I think approaching any situation with empathy and openness will help create that belonging, whether you're in a classroom, in your office, with an employee, student, whatever it is your business does. I think bringing that curiosity and a genuine curiosity, not a curiosity to degrade or to judge, but a genuine curiosity to understand how someone experiences the world or how a business approaches a certain thing, because you'll learn things that you thought you already knew. I'm also bilingual, and I learned through that journey. People see the world very, very differently. Even just something as simple as a conversation about how many continents we have. There are places where people see that we have 5, 6, 7. I was like, okay, I come from a place where we have 7. Let me look at a map, and I didn't even know that existed until having a conversation where someone said that we about the 5 continents, and I said, oh, what 5 continents? Can you name them for me? Because I just wanted to know. And then I started looking and learning more about something I didn't know, which I thought I'd known because it had been ingrained in me all of these years. And here I am, middle age, figuring out people don't see the world that way. But I didn't approach it with "you're wrong." I approached it with "let me understand where it's coming from," and then finding out more information myself helped me say, "Oh wow, this is mind blowing for me that people see the world that way." So I think humility and an open mind will help you in any situation.
I love the term genuine curiosity. I think that's something that all of us, need to practice again, especially in the time that we're in right now, where we do have such a we have a lot of divisive conversations going on, I'll say, to approach it from that genuine curiosity and empathy space. So yeah, thank you for that, Alexander. Carmen, would you like to add anything?
Absolutely. As Alexander was talking about before about, human interactions, right? And being in HR for almost 30 years, I can say it doesn't come naturally to many people, especially when there is a conflict involved in views, right? And I want to springboard on the curiosity component because we look at conflict to curiosity, right? So, how do we get people from a state of conflict to being open and vulnerable to hearing a different kind of perspective, right? How do we get them to lean into that, from being maybe an active resistor to saying, gosh, I want to be curious about why you feel that way or why you have that point of view. And that is a leap that we need to do in an education perspective, right? So part of what we are doing and what I'm personally doing is a couple of different things, right? So we are working hard on a feedback culture, and that is a shift in how we speak to our employees and how they speak to us, right? And the level of mobility of how feedback flows, and it's just not one directional. It can come from a variety of different directions. Looking at mentoring, right? So the ability that we have to mentor people, whether it is upward mentoring, or you're mentoring peers or you're mentoring future leaders, you have the ability to expand their mind. You've got the ability to expand how they critically think about things. And I think that is a way that you can expand your reach in assisting people to become better leaders in this space, is by doing different mentoring, which I actively do with a number of different people. And And then I think you kind of pull a lot of this all together by ensuring that you've got good listening happening, right? So incredibly important that we're listening in a timely basis and that we're doing something about what we're hearing. That is so incredibly important. So often, organizations will listen and it's just, okay, we did it, and there's just not an action plan behind that to do something with that feedback, because those are the real experiences that people are having, and that is the best pulse on culture that you're going to get is what is coming directly out of your employees' mouth and how they are experiencing your organization.
And I'm just going to echo what you just said. I think we sometimes forget that it's great to get feedback, but if you don't take action on it, people stop giving feedback and
Yes.
you lose them. And, and I think that's something that, a lot of leaders, a lot of folks just forget that, yes, you do actually have to take action when someone gives you feedback. Even if it's saying, yeah, we're not going to do that, it's still, a response. Michele, what would you like to add?
I just want to add, when we work with our leaders, one of the things I try to reinforce and encourage leaders to truly practice is what I like to call a couple of the really beautiful questions. And one of them is, tell me more. It allows you to stay in that place of curiosity, and thoroughly really hear someone's viewpoint or where they're coming from. And certainly, one of the other beautiful questions is help me understand. Help me understand your viewpoint or why how you see it that way. And another key point I try to make with leaders often is try to avoid the use of the word why when you're asking a question. Immediately makes people defensive, puts you on the defensive emotionally. And your conversation can truly come to a screeching halt at that point. So it is some of what all of the speakers have said. Remain curious. And that takes some effort, and it takes some self-awareness. How do I suspend my judgment? And the conversation that is instantly going on in my head when someone says something that I feel is controversial or different than what I believe, and so forth. How do I stay in that position of remaining curious and simply asking them to tell you more about their viewpoint and how they see things and so forth enables that. So I think there are ways we could help people be empathetic and open.
Absolutely. And Michele, the one I like to use is say more words. Say more words. Help me understand. So I love that. Alexander, I think this one is specifically for you. So I'm going to ask, I'm a corporate trainer. What is the best example you have seen when DEI&B was integrated into a training context when it wasn't the topic of focus?
Oh, okay. So just off top, most of my discussions, it is the topic of focus. So it's not usually a surprise for people when it comes into my discussions. However, because I do work on both sides of the coin, where I'm at the faculty side, staff admin side, that I do go through some of the other discussions, some of the other trainings that our leaders experience. And many of those trainings aren't always focused on DEI. However, there is a relationship to what it is, or some topic that we're talking about relates to something that is DEI related. In those moments, I think it is ideal for the trainer or anybody in the room in the space can also do this, is to make the connections between what you're learning. Because I think sometimes when we think about training sessions, we don't always put the connections to the different trainings. So we're like, oh, I'm learning about this thing. But we forget about that we learned about something else over here until something triggers us in this space. And I think it's even though the trainers aren't always the same, so it may be difficult for them to think what you learned last week over here because that wasn't their session. So they're not talking about that. But if you notice that there is a connection to an idea, I don't think we should have the fear of addressing that and talking about the relationship, because That's one of the things that gets students through the course, is that as educators, we have to make the connections and build on the foundational knowledge of things that they've learned. And I think in any training session, the trainer can also make those connections. Of course, we can't expect our trainer to know this information because they're talking about something over here. So if you can help make that connection for them and not expect that they're going to come with that same knowledge that you got last week, because that's why they weren't doing that training session. That wasn't their space. So don't have those expectations, but don't have the fear of making the connections. And one of the things that I've experienced with us is that sometimes the language, as I said earlier, semantics plays a huge role. And sometimes organizations are still trying to get in the DEIB, but they may not be using the terminology in order to circumnavigate legal challenges. So being able to read the room and recognize those things is also important. So if you don't want your discussion to go awry and go in the direction where that you can't bring this back to a healthy environment for everyone in that room. I don't know if I answered that fully, but I tried.
No, I think that was great. And I think, I think that's one of the pieces, is that it does become this, you kind of try to sneak in that DEI training into all of the trainings, and even things like visuals, things like that, that you can kind of pull into the conversation and, pull into what you're showing and training on. I think it's just also great. So Carmen, Michele, anything you'd like to add? Michele, looks like yes.
Yes, so DEIB education should just be part of how an organization does its business. Period. End of story. Whether it's in a training session, whether it's in your hiring practices, how you develop your leaders, it doesn't need to be. And what my hope is that eventually it isn't something different and separate and apart in an organization. It is simply embedded in how we do business. We consider these things as we make hiring decisions, as we're training them so they deal with our customers or our members effectively. We embed it in our leadership training so they know and understand how to deal with the diverse employees they have, that they're working with. It should just be part of how the organization does business. So finding ways in which you can simply embed that learning as part, that education is part of the regular learning, should be a goal of a learning organization within a company. And it should be part of the hiring practice. It should be part of leadership development.
I love
Not
that.
separate.
Yeah, no, I love that. Because I think that's such a critical piece, is that, you as an HR person, I don't, Carmen, I'm almost there, same amount of years as you. I'm not quite at 30 yet, but I almost. But it is one of those things that, having those trainings with leaders, with team members, and making sure that you're being thoughtful about weaving it into the conversation, because you bring up, oh, hey, you're going to go to a diversity training. We have to do that from a compliance perspective. No, let's weave it into other conversations, into performance management and other cyclical processes. I think that's so important. So awesome. Thank you, Michele. And Carmen, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would say don't ever underestimate, especially in the space of education, learning, and training, somebody who's masterful at facilitating, because a masterful facilitator will demonstrate really good, just their interaction from a belonging perspective, encouraging healthy conflict, getting diverse perspectives in the room, right? So all of the different things that you want your leaders to do on a daily basis, sometimes when you can see that in action, and even as simple as somebody who's just a really expert facilitator can bring that to life. And those are the tips and the tricks and the phraseology that they can bring into their everyday life that helps create that and build that culture of belonging and inclusion.
Awesome. Thank you. So another question, in addition to what your organization does to promote inclusion and belonging in your workplace, do you have recruiting or hiring tips to ensure your staff is a diverse representation of the community and inclusive of all? So Michele, can we start with you there?
Yeah, we participate in a very diverse audience of recruiting events. We purposefully create partnerships with organizations from underrepresented communities. So, for example, we have a partnership right now with the Greater Phoenix Urban League. We actually bring into our organization their high school grads as part of an intern program and project. We have partnerships with an HBCU, a historically Black college and university, and we purposefully built that relationship. And I can tell you, for example, from a business standpoint, that relationship serves us as well as the college because they actually have Black actuaries, which is there may be 600 in the entire country. So we have need for strong actuaries. So we partnered with a school who we can serve their audience and they can help support our organization as well. We're very purposeful about reaching out and including those audiences that may have been considered non-traditional before and including them as part of our hiring practices.
Awesome. Thanks, Michele. Carmen, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I have a very specific view on this. So as it relates to kind of, from a talent perspective, I think HR and the talent acquisition kind of function is only part of the equation, right? So there's only so much. Many of us are resource constrained, right? That we can do in getting included in all of the different organizations, right? And sometimes it's working through your community development organization in different areas of your organization that have different arms and legs into the community. And then again, leaders own they have skin in the game in this space, right? They have got to be out in the community in their areas of expertise, and they need to be cultivating those relationships and cultivating a pathway back into your organization. So I think HR having really good relationships and sharing what that expectation is of, gosh, if I am an engineering leader, I need to be really understanding all of the pathways of engineering into the organization and how we can cultivate a workforce that is reflective of the communities that we serve, right? So it's so incredibly important that you have many different pathways that are leading people into the organization.
And I think Michele and Carmen, both of you kind of said the thing that I think sometimes gets lost is you need to look at other sources. So going to those HBCUs, going to what are the other pathways that someone can get to you, boot camps, whatever it might be, and looking at those other spaces, because everyone's going to Stanford, everyone's going to ASU, everyone's going, and so we know that. And so where else can we look? So I love that. And Alexander, I know you're one of the places that folks should be looking as well. So anything you'd like to add to this piece?
The only thing that I'd add is that, well, our organization in particular, we've been reviewing our hiring process because I think we don't always recognize the skewed diversity that we have in institutions. And for higher education, our diversity is skewed more towards staff and admin as opposed to our faculty ranks. We have way less diversity across the country nationally when it comes to faculty. So I think some of the things that we're doing is reviewing, okay, what are the processes that we can build up our adjunct ranks, because a lot of us hire from our adjuncts that we have in our pools of adjuncts. How are we reaching out to them? How are we reaching out to other schools? Are there conferences that focus on particular areas while people are doing the hiring so that they can put their job announcements in those? We also look at the actual process for applying. So trying to enhance the efficacy or the efficiency in the hiring process when it comes to applying online or applying to our institutions, and also pathways for those that are also within our institution, creating internal portals for them to see some of the open positions that they are able to hire for. But we also review and take a look at the longevity of people that are in leadership positions, because sometimes it's not even your intention. It may not be your intention, but the messages that employees receive when they see someone who looks like them or who has a connection to whatever whatever social situation that they are in, they don't last long in those positions. So it discourages a lot of the diversity that you would have in some of those positions if you're not able to maintain people who look like them in those positions. And I think we review and take a look at all of these different levels of hiring internally and externally and the longevity and try to figure out why people leave us or come to us, just so that we can build on what we do through those stories.
Awesome. Okay. Questions are coming in fast and furious, so I'm going to have each of you answer, just have a solo answer. Can you provide some advice to someone looking to pivot to work in the DEI space? Michele, can you answer this one?
Bring your life experience and get educated. I mean, do the work to understand the field, understand the issues, understand the environment so that you can effectively add value to your organization in the role.
Awesome. Thank you. Carmen, what are your thoughts on assessing employee feeling of belonging with confidential surveys as a way to assess what's working, not working? Would employees participate and be honest? And so I know you touched on this a little bit, so would love for you to continue that.
Absolutely. We confidentially survey everybody annually and then a pulse survey every single quarter. We then do listening sessions, of which are typically just a meeting like this, so it's not a confidential fashion. But we know that confidentiality is important in being able for people able to feel honest and being able to share their honest feelings. We get a very good participation rate. We have a very good participation rate. And again, the key of that is listening to it, absorbing the feedback, and saying, okay, how can I make this better? Right? It's what's done is done. How can we move the needle forward at this point in time? And I've seen over the many years, right? Sometimes people get kind of wrapped around the axle of why or who said it. All right. It doesn't really matter, right? If you have 1 out of 20 people that isn't feeling respected, or they're not feeling included, or they're not feeling valued, you've got to work on that, right? And it gives you a very clear roadmap when you have that kind of feedback to set forth a variety of different things to help continue to evolve your culture, right? It's never a revolution, it's always an evolution.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. As a Black lesbian woman working in marketing, I'm passionate about leveraging my identity to drive inclusive campaigns and initiatives while also expanding my professional brand within my organization and beyond. What strategies would you recommend for effectively balancing authenticity with professional growth in a corporate environment, particularly for individuals from underrepresented communities who are striving to create meaningful visibility? I'm sure all of you will want to answer this, but Alexander, let's you kick it off.
I'm happy to kick it off, trying to remember all the parts of that question.
Yes.
But don't necessarily fit the identity that you put out there. But I think one of the things that I heard was that how do you drive inclusivity focused on and leveraging your own identity? I think for me, as a Black gay male in higher education, I generally do my best to not only get educated in the areas that impact me, but also in the areas that impact others, so that I can understand how my perspective might differ from someone else's and where they might converge. Because I think a lot of the time, interest convergence is really important. And if you can find connections with others, so it doesn't necessarily minimize your differences, but it creates a space for you to have an open dialogue, because now you can see where you both are in alignment and on the same page for something. But also, I think I heard I'm trying to remember all the parts. How do I balance being authentic in that space as well? Because I know that there are differences between me and someone else, even if I can find those similarities. What I'll do is speak to and contextualize those differences and how it makes me approach whatever the topic is that we're discussing, or policy development, how I might relate to that, or the impact that it might have on someone where we differ. Yes, here we are similar and we will approach it in this kind of way, but at the same time, here's another aspect of my identity in which this particular policy development or this event or whatever it might be impacts me in a very, very different way. And I want to make sure that I share that with everyone here. But I will also say, in that contextualization and talking about our differences, sometimes those differences aren't received well by others, which is why that contextualization comes in being very, very important. This is why I'm approaching it in this kind of way, not in an adversarial way or whatever it might be. This is why this is important, and here's the outcome. And if our goal is this outcome, I can't get there by the development of whatever this thing is or this situation.
Awesome. Thank you. Carmen, anything you'd like to add on that one?
Yeah, I'd say, you know, being a master from an emotional intelligence perspective is really critical of I think knowing when to flex, right? I mean, I'm always unabashedly and proudly who I am from that perspective. So I don't like to trade or bargain for that, right? But how much I advocate versus how much I may evangelize about something is going to be on a spectrum depending upon me reading my room and reading what the audience is at that from that perspective. You know, I loved what Alexander said about learning about other perspectives, because I try to hold space to always listen, learn, and read what other areas, whether those are other news sources, what's being fed to a variety of different stakeholders in the world, and understanding, you know, what are the challenges, or, you know, what are the areas or the misunderstandings, right? How do I strengthen my story by understanding what is being shared in different venues? And so I think kind of pulling all of that together makes you come into the room in a more educated way to be able to be more impactful while you're there at the table.
Great. Michele, anything to add?
This may be a bit too simplistic. I just think it's important to be who you are. Unabashedly, authentically who you are.
I love that. So last question, and I'm actually going to add a little bit more. So Jericho, your question on how you can get into the DEI space, I'm going to tell you the 4 people here, myself included, follow, connect with us on LinkedIn, have conversations with folks that are doing this work. There's a woman, Aubrey Blanche, I would also recommend everyone listen to and connect with. She's phenomenal. And she actually does a lot of work on why folks shouldn't join the DEI space, but should do this work from whatever role they're in the organization. So there's that. But last question for everyone here. So proponents of inclusion, what is your advice to other organizations seeking to create an inclusive culture? So Carmen, kick us off, please.
Start from the top. Have a very strong why, and have a repeatable narrative from that perspective. Listen more than your talk, from from ensuring that you're going to do that, and understand the change cadence, right? People, it's hard right now. There's just a lot of change coming at people. So don't underestimate the resilience that it takes. So this isn't something that is rushed. It's not something you can get done in 12 months. It's a continual evolution of small steps, creating a great foundation and platform.
Awesome. Michele?
Include your employees. Include the employees, get them involved, make them part of the discussion, and have them act in many cases as your evangelists for your why, and show and ensure your leadership support. But absolutely involve your employees.
Awesome. Thanks, Michele. Alexander?
I have just 2 things. One, we don't always think about the impact of data. Even if you can't justify a lot of different things, numbers don't always lie. Of course, there is you're qualitative in there, how you got here. But at the same time, if someone else you're trying to present, here's the result, here's the change that we've seen, you can do that with numbers. And have grace, because you're not always going to get it right. And what worked today may not work tomorrow. Even if you've done it for 15 years, it's wonderful. But this year, it does not work for the people that are in your organization or who you're serving at this point. So be able to pivot, but have grace that you're going to need to change some things at some point.
Awesome. And on that note, thank you all for joining us. And, to Alexander's point, this year and the next couple of years are going to be interesting, we'll say. and a lot of work. And so, keep the work going as much as you possibly can. And again, reach out to all of these folks. We would love to connect and would love to support in any way. We do have one more question about books to read. And so I'm going to ask each of you to do something for me. So Michele, Alexander, and Carmen, if you could post on your LinkedIn profile in the next 2 days, what your favorite books are around DEI. So for all of you who are on this panel, and I'll do the same thing, share your books. What are the books that will help people learn more about this work? And, the other piece is you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Keep going, keep up the good fight, and thank you so much for joining us today. Take care.